So if you're watching this and you're a streamer, you've been streaming for quite a while now and you want to look at upgrading your camera. You've been using a Logitech C920 until now and you're just not getting that quality that you want, that you see in some other streamers out there. Let's talk about cameras today. Guys, before we move on, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It means a lot that you guys are watching my channel, and please continue to do so because it really helps me out. Head on down to the description box below where I've got links to all of my social media, including my Twitch, where I do plan to start streaming again. I've got lots of exciting content coming for you guys, so don't miss out. Get subscribing, get following. So I've done a video on this before a couple of weeks ago where I talk about what I think is the best, cheapest streaming camera available right now. Well, I want to give you a bit more option. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to compare two of what I think are the best, cheapest cameras. One of them I've already showcased on this channel, which is the Sony A5100. The other one is the Canon M200. Both of these are your entry-level streaming cameras for content creators who want to just upgrade from that webcam to the next best thing. So like I mentioned in one of my previous videos, there are a few things that you want a streaming camera to have. One of them is they have to be easy to use. Secondly, they have to have a clean HDMI output. Thirdly, and most ideally, they have to have a flip out or a flip up screen. And both of these cameras, the Canon M200 and the Sony A5100, has all of those features. Both of these cameras are capable of recording at 1080-60. This one can even record at 4K at 24 FPS. However, that's irrelevant when you're streaming because with this one, the 4K 24 FPS is cropped. Both of these, in my opinion, are fantastic choices for cameras. However, currently I'm using the M200 just because I've kind of bought into the Canon ecosystem and I've got a range of lenses that I can kind of interchange very easily without having to spend extra on different types of lenses. So lenses that I use for my Canon M50 can go on the Canon M200 and I don't have to buy brand new lenses to work on, say, a Sony camera. The Canon M200 has that 15 to 45mm f3.5 to 6.3 lens on it, which is the kit lens. It's got a very nice and slim form factor with that nice flip up screen that you want to be able to see yourself with. Now, the one thing that I've seen that's good with the Canon M200 screen is that when you're streaming with it, the screen shuts itself off after a little while, which is good because it saves power. All you have to do is just kind of tap anything on the screen or on the camera to get it back to life if you want to see yourself in the camera. However, when you're streaming, you've probably got that up on OBS or something anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. Fantastic little camera. I think, you know, in terms of build quality and how it feels, it's a very, very good camera. I haven't used it much for photography or recording videos and stuff, so I don't know, you know, in comparison to the M50, how nice this is, but the only one thing, I think it's very similar in terms of its specs to the Canon M50. However, the one thing that this is lacking is a headphone jack. It doesn't have a headphone jack. It does have a nice clean HDMI output as well as a card reader. So the Canon M200 is a 24.1 megapixel mirrorless camera with a 6000 by 4000 maximum resolution. It has an APS-C format CMOS crop sensor measuring at 22.3 by 14.9 millimeters. It can shoot at 720p at 120 fps, 1080p at 60 fps, and 4K at 24 fps. However, that image is further cropped by 1.6 times. Best thing about these mirrorless cameras is you can just kind of take them off and use them for photography or videos and everything else. Already showcased the Sony A5100 on this channel, but as you can see, it's got the 16 to 50mm kit lens on it, which has a aperture of 3.5 to 5.6. Again, very good build, very nice, heavy, sturdy. Again, it's got that flip up screen, which you want. Another thing I like is that it's got that grip, which a lot of other small form factor cameras or mirrorless cameras don't have, such as the M200 doesn't have that. It's a bit more awkward to kind of hold. You've got that little grip thing on the back here. I don't know if you guys can see, but it's got that little grip thing here on the back, but it's not as nice as holding it with the front grip that you've got here. The Sony A5100 is a 24.3 megapixel mirrorless camera with a maximum resolution also of 6000 by 4000. It has an APS-C type CMOS crop sensor as well, which is slightly bigger at 23.5 by 15.6 millimeters. The camera can shoot at 1080p at 60 fps and it does not have 4K capabilities. So an important thing that I forgot to mention is that one thing you want your cameras to have is obviously an interchangeable lens. Like I said, the reason I'm using the Canon M200 now as kind of my main streaming camera is because I've kind of bought into the Canon ecosystem. I use the Canon M50 as my main camera, and I've got a whole array of lenses for that, and a lot of them can be used on the M200. Well, all of them can be used because they've both got the EFM lens mount. All of them can be used on the Canon M200, and it's very, very handy just to be able to kind of use the lenses that you've already got on your streaming camera without having to kind of buy new ones, just like I mentioned. Next up, I'm going to set these guys up side by side to see what the difference is between the quality is with the kit lens on, and I'm going to swap that out with the 16mm Sigma lenses that I've got for both of these, just to see how different they are. So as you can see, I've put the cameras as close as possible to one another, just above my monitor, and this is usually where I have my streaming camera set up. So guys, we've come over into OBS and I've positioned the cameras as close together as possible, like as close as space would allow it. And you know, there are obviously limitations, so I put them together and I've got the two cameras here. So on the left hand side you can see the Canon, and on the right hand side, or the bottom right hand side, you can see the Sony A5100. Now, a few things to note. This is running through OBS. Actual camera quality is probably going to be a lot crisper than what you're seeing as a recording because of bitrate issues that OBS has just in general. Whatever it's capturing now isn't a true reflection of the camera quality, but it is kind of a rough reflection of what your stream might see when you're using one of these cameras. So that being said, both cameras are set to automatic ISO, automatic white balance. Both of them are set to a shutter speed of 1/60, and both of them are set to 3.5 aperture. Just to make it as standard as possible, no filters, no additional tweaking with colors or anything like that. They are set to as default as possible, with those things being kind of like, you know, as close together as possible. Both of them are set to 1080p 60 FPS recording, so that the kind of frame rate you're seeing is exactly the same. I do want to make clear that this camera test is purely to see how both of these cameras are doing as webcams or as a streaming camera, rather than a pure camera comparison between the two, because if that was the case, then we'd have to kind of go into a whole depth of other things. But just as streaming cameras and what I can see in OBS, let's get to it. So we're going to start with the Canon M200. Now, it's pretty clear. It gives a very clear picture. It's capturing a lot of the light and kind of a little bit of the light glare that's coming up from my key light that I've got up here. The picture image are quite bright, so it looks, to me, very good. You know, it doesn't look too washed out, though. You know, I think if you look in comparison to the Sony, it does look a little washed out to me. But you know, that's nothing that can't be fixed with kind of color coding. You can see the mic, and you can see how much it captures kind of the dark shadows and the blacks. It's also capturing a good amount of my nice bright red t-shirt, which I wore specifically for this occasion. Now, one thing we can see in comparison to the Sony is that it does look like that it's not got as big a field of view, and that's probably to do with it having a slightly smaller sensor size. Not sure exactly the reason. Both of them have very similar lenses, so both of them are completely zoomed out to the minimum focal length that they can get to. For the Canon, that's 15mm, and I think for the Sony that's actually 16mm. So given that the Sony is at 16mm, it's still capturing more of the room behind me than the Canon is. You can kind of see as I put my hands aside across, my left hand here completely disappears from the Canon, whereas the Sony is still catching it right underneath the mic. It might be to do with the angle, but even then, if I've just kind of tweaked it a little bit, you can still kind of see, no, let's put it down here. You can still kind of see there my hand kind of disappears off of the Canon, whereas with the Sony it doesn't. And you can also see like it's capturing more of the acoustic foam on the walls behind me, and kind of more of the bookshelf in that corner, as well as the sofa and everything. So the Sony is, I'm going to move the mic out of the way because it feels like it's kind of distracting. There we go. So it does look like the Sony camera is capturing more. However, the Sony does seem to have a little bit of a red tint to it. It's like my face feels and looks more blushed. I don't know exactly why that is. It shouldn't be to do with the capture cards. Both of them are using the exact same capture card running at 60 FPS. So it shouldn't be the capture card doing anything to the quality of the images that you're seeing. This is purely kind of as a result of the camera. It might be to do with the type of sensor that Sony has or to do with the lens itself. But overall, it looks like, you know, that the Sony is capturing more. So if you want to go for that kind of wide angle look, then definitely the Sony camera is winning here. Whereas I prefer, especially if I'm using the webcam to capture me while I'm using gameplay, I want that narrower field of view. So the M200 kind of comes in clutch in that perspective. You know, I'm getting a little bit of a smaller field of view, smaller angle. It's not as wide as, it's still wide, but it's not as wide as a Sony. Obviously, both of these are using the stock lenses, so we can clearly see in this aspect, you're going to have to just kind of make a judgment as to which one you prefer. Personally, I prefer the M200. Again, I've also bought into the kind of Canon ecosystem, so I've got all the lenses ready for use with an M200 that I use with my Canon M50. I just really like the way Canon do their cameras as well. Whereas with the Sony, I'd have to buy kind of a whole array of new lenses if I wanted to use them for streaming as well. But I don't want to use too many different types of cameras. If I want to set up a stream with multiple cameras from multiple angles, then having the Canon is probably a lot easier. Anyway, besides that, the Sony, in terms of the amount of color it's taking in, is probably looking a little bit better. Yes, the Canon looks a little bit whiter and more washed out, whereas the Sony is kind of capturing more of my natural skin color than the Canon is, whereas the Canon is kind of reflecting off more of that light. It's capturing more of the light than it should be, whereas Sony seems to filter that out, and it's capturing more of that natural look that I've got, and kind of more of the ambience within the room. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to these Sigma 16mm lenses for both of the cameras and see the difference between them when they have exactly the same lens. Okay, here we've got both the cameras with the Sigma 16mm lens put on them, and still with the Canon we can see it looks a little bit more washed out. Everything looks a lot brighter, but a little bit more washed out. You can kind of see the glare on my glasses a little bit more clearer, and the kind of light reflecting off my face a little bit more, whereas the Sony, again, is capturing a lot more redness, and I'm not sure exactly why that is. All the settings are kind of set to default. As I move around, you can see kind of the image on both of them is exceptionally clear from what I'm seeing, but you know, the end product might not be exactly the same. You can see that slight bokeh as I kind of move forward on both the cameras. You can see that bokeh effect kind of going, and that's because of the 1.4 aperture that both of them have got going. Let me just double check that both of them are. Yes, both of them are at 60, a shutter speed of 1/60 and a 1.4 aperture. So you can see that kind of bokeh effect that goes around behind me on both the cameras. And again, the kind of closer I move to the camera, you can see that the Sony is capturing a lot more color compared to the Canon. The Canon is a little bit more washed out. Again, that's nothing that can't be fixed kind of post-production sometimes, or that can't be fixed by color grading it a little bit or adding a filter or so. But this seems to not be focusing as nicely. Oh no, there it is, it's focused. Hopefully, let's just make sure that both of them are nicely focused. Yep. So again, it looks like the Sony is capturing a little bit more. It's angled a little bit towards the other direction actually. But in general, actually, oh god, completely. So this time it's actually harder to tell which camera is capturing more of the room, because the lenses are so big and they are a little bit further away from one another. It looks like with the 16mm, the Sony still does manage to capture just a tad bit more of the room than the Canon does. that's the word, it's Canon. So the Sony versus the Canon, the Sony seems to be capturing a little bit more of the room, and again, that's probably due to having a slightly larger sensor. However, that's making very minimal difference when you're putting two of the exact same lens on them. Both are performing very well. It looks like the images, from what I can see, are fantastically clear. But again, the Canon looks a little bit more brighter, whereas Sony's capturing that much more color. So depending on your preference, I prefer the kind of slightly brighter look because I know I can kind of fix that up later on. Whereas with the color, I have to do a little bit more tweaking. Personally, I prefer the Canon. However, it's up to you guys. What do you think? Out of the two cameras, which one do you think, through OBS, through what would be your kind of stream engine, you'll get the same kind of result through Streamlabs OBS as well, or majority of the kind of streaming software that you use, which one do you guys prefer? Let me know in the comment section down below, because so far I'm liking the Canon a little bit more than the Sony, and obviously I'm using the Canon as my main streaming camera now, so you know, my preference is kind of leaning towards that way. It's a little bit of a bias. However, the Sony still looks like a fantastic quality camera, especially at the price point that it comes, being at least £100, $100 cheaper than the Canon used. You can see that the Sony is producing fantastic results overall. To be very honest, the coloring and the amount of color that the Sony is capturing is superior to that of the Canon, and I do prefer that slightly wide angle look on some of my streams. I've even got that 14mm lens that goes on my Canon when I want to capture that nice wide angle view during my streams. So guys, I hope you found this nice little comparison useful. Do let me know in the comments below which camera you'd prefer, or if there's another camera out there that you think is superior to both of these at a cheaper price point. I know Fujifilm do quite a few good cheap APS-C cameras, so definitely let me know in the comments below what you think is the best streaming camera coming up to the end of 2020. Now, moving forward into the next year, we're going to see a lot of new streaming tech. I'm really excited to bring you more and more content, so make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, make sure you guys hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and do make sure you guys go follow me on Twitch so that you can see exactly what my streams look like with all the different lenses that I use and all the different camera setups that I'm going to be kind of testing out over the next couple of months. So don't miss out, make sure you guys catch me there. Until next time everybody, Kai24 signing out. Oh shit! Is this Tatooine? Honestly, it feels like Tatooine, but you know what? I don't like sand. It's coarse and it's harsh and it gets everywhere.